Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a fairly short and sweet video, and it's one of those videos which has crossover for both booktube and authortube. This is World War II and Holocaust settings I would like to see more of in historical fiction, as well as like ideas if you're a writer yourself, for like how you can elevate your book. And this is based off of a blog post which I originally published on the 23rd of September 2023. Now, I'm sure we're pretty much all familiar with this if we're like read any historical fiction, or if we're just like generally readers at all, or even sometimes it all obviously also carries over to historical films and television shows. A lot of people, they just like complain that all World War II and Holocaust books are the same story over and over again, that writers only choose the setting because it's popular or we're lazy, and that they refuse to read these books because they're so overdone and depressing. As someone who has chosen to write many 1940s historicals, and I have many other waiting in the queue as well, I have to disagree about this ignorant dismissal of an entire subgenre of historical fiction. I don't believe most of these people making this complaint, they're like genuinely trying to bash those of us who do like read and write a lot of this stuff. Like maybe they really are like tired of it, or they just genuinely aren't aware of like the unique possibilities within this. They've basically just like read like popular things, and so of course those ones are going to feature the same basically premise and setting and stuff over and over again. But if you're not really deep into historical fiction, and particularly in the World War II Holocaust subgenre within historical fiction, you will be aware of like a really great diversity. But unfortunately, just many people, I'm so sorry I'm sounding like a broken record already, they just don't know about this if they're not within it. And that also I know applies to many other genres. Like for example, fantasy isn't my thing at all. So like, what would I know about like fantasy? Maybe some of the complaints I've made about like fantasy, or like not high sci-fi, like hard sci-fi in the past, maybe those would be groundless because I just don't have any familiarity with the genre. And so anyway, if you are writing about this era, however, you do need an original angle and a setting to set your book apart. Here are some ideas for how to do just that. Number one, set your book outside of Europe and North America. So many other countries were involved in this world war. How about Japan, China, Korea, India, Burma, Iran, Iraq, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, pre-state Israel, Armenia, Georgia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Australia, Argentina, Brazil, the Dutch East Indies, or Turkey. And that's just to name a very small amount. Like seriously, use your imagination and think outside of the box, particularly when people are constantly saying, oh, it's just like I'm tired of reading about it in Europe, or like North US America, or Canada, or whatever like that. So just don't even set it in those continents. Like think totally outside of the box. It's not as if the World War II was only being felt or fought within those like particular continents and countries. Number two, if you do want to use Europe, try a country that hasn't been represented much in the popular literature. Try Greece, Norway, Italy, Bulgaria, Albania, Serbia, Croatia, Latvia. And again, that's just a short sampling of things. You can basically just think outside of the box or do your own research. Like, oh, for example, I've read so many books about Poland or Germany or France or the Netherlands or Belgium or England or whatever. Oh, so maybe I could try Ireland or something, or Greece. I don't think I've ever read any books like either like, fiction or memoir about that. That would really help to elevate my book. Number three, you can set your book in a country that was neutral but still felt the war, like Sweden or Switzerland. Number four, everyone loves a story about someone who fights back. Try writing about a resistance fighter, partisan, or someone who joins one of the free forces in Europe. Number five, many people don't know about the Ustashi horror in Croatia and Serbia. Even the Nazis thought the Ustashis were sadistic punks, which is saying a hell of a lot. Like seriously, how awful and cruel do you have to be for the Nazis to say you're going way too far? There were less than 100 survivors of the brutal Ustashi camp, Jasenovac. The female lead of my hiatus work-in-progress Newark love story, Svetlana, her mother, and her four sisters, are among the small band of survivors. They escaped in a mass revolt at the end, armed only with weapons like bricks, hammers, and poles. And one of the characters in another hiatus work-in-progress of mine, A Dream Deferred, he's more of a secondary character, Professor Eduard Novak. He's Croatian. He is also a survivor of Jasenovac, and his wife is Serbian. She's a doctor, a surgeon who survived with the partisans in the woods, and like basically being in Jasenovac and escaping that huge revolt near the end with barely any survivors. That basically like kind of like, you know, effed up his mind, and he's like basically can't really like leave the house much after he immigrates to America with his family. It's just like really, really, that's again something to explore. Like no matter like what circumstances your character was in, these many of these people, like they were not really ever normal again, or like it took a really long time to heal and come back to some semblance of normalcy. And unfortunately, in that era, there was this attitude of what's not nice we don't show. Why would you go to psychotherapy? That's only for like, you know, weirdos or like rich people who live in places like New York City or San Francisco. But some people did, like, you know, fortunately they overcame the stigma, or like didn't even care about the stigma, and they just went to like a psychotherapist, or someone introduced a psychotherapist to them, and they, you know, they started healing their mind and things like that. So that's another really like interesting original angle to explore in your book. Number 6. Most of the books about the Japanese American experience to date have been nonfiction. We really need more fiction about both the internment camps and Japanese Americans in the military. Number 7. How about showing a family who's not Jewish, politically active, or part of any other unpopular or persecuted groups in Europe? We need more novels showing what it was like to just be part of an ordinary family experiencing the war and occupation. And I did write a blog post about this. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I know I did not do a video based on it yet. It's a fairly short memoir. I would guess it kind of straddles the fence between upper middle grade and lower YA. Till the Break of Day by, I'm hopefully I'm not about to butcher her name. Maia Wojciechowska. I can like put it on down in the description box below, but she's, you know, like a really like fun out of the box person. She has since passed away. She's a spunky tomboy. She has an older brother and a younger brother, and the family like escapes Warsaw. Or, I think they lived in Warsaw. I'm sorry if I'm blanking on it. It's been a while since I last read the book. And they escape Poland on the first day of the war. They have a quite eventful train journey, and actually in my book, it was called the very next. I'm totally blanking on its like new and improved title, because I thought of it by its working title for so many years. Movements in the Symphony of 1939. Maia's family's escape from Poland like on the first day of the war, and they're like eventful, like stopping, like trains are bombed, so they have to like walk for 3 days at one point, and then like get another train, and they just miss a train that's then bombed itself. And that was really strongly based on some of my characters' escape in that book. So I really do owe a lot to her book, and some other things in her memoir have also, you know, like made their way into other like books and stuff of mine over the years. And so anyway, her family goes to France for a while, then they're like smuggled in potato sacks in the back of a truck. That is also something that was like very, very strongly inspired something in my one of my current works in progress. Its working title is The Very Last. I'm keeping its new and improved title a secret until it is published, God willing, hopefully sometime later this year. And so they're smuggled into Vichy, France, in potato sacks in the back of a truck, and there's a bit of trouble. Maia like basically hops to the front of the truck because she's like kind of annoyed at her mother and brother. That's one thing I can relate to her about, not having a warm, close-knit, lovey-dovey relationship with her mother. She just like wants to be by herself, and she just like basically breaking the mold in a totally, you know, spunky tomboy. And so anyway, there's this guy who's like searching the back of a truck and putting bayonets into them at one point, and the bayonet goes through Maia's sack and barely just like misses scraping her knee, and there's a little bit of blood, but thankfully there's no blood on the bayonet. And like everyone's like, the smuggler is like frantically ripping open all the sacks to look for her, and she's not giving herself away. When they reach their destination, suddenly she starts laughing, and her mother and older brother think she's kind of like stupid and lost her mind and stuff, but like she really doesn't care. She's just feeling so totally alienated from her family at that point. And anyway, then they go to Spain and Portugal, and there's some more like adventures and misadventures there, and then they finally sail to England, and they're like at the end of the book they're sailing to America. I presume that was basically one of the final ships permitted to sail from Europe to America, because like the war was on at that point. It was probably like 1942, I believe, and she had a very, very colorful life. And so I'm sorry if I've rambled, but that's, you know, the kind of thing you want to put into a book, and the kinds of things I would like to see more of in a book. A story like Maia's, like she's not like Jewish or like a politically active person or like any unpopular other group like, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses or like lesbian or whatever, anything like that. She's just like a normal Polish girl who's like a refugee, but her family is, you know, like fairly like well-to-do, and her father's in the army and stuff, so that, you know, having adventures like that, and it's not like tied to her identity. It's just like she's being herself, and she's happening to live in the war. Like, sorry, like a ramble over. Number 8. We need more books about the Pacific Theater and the China-India-Burma Theater. Like off the top of my head, I cannot think of any books at all about the China-India-Burma Theater. Or like maybe I've seen like a film or two over the years about it, but again, I couldn't even like recall that if I have seen any of those either. Number 9. Too many novels and memoirs stop soon after the liberation, when an equally compelling story was just beginning for the survivors. My hiatus, work in progress, The Strongest Branches of Uprooted Trees, goes from late March 1945 to sometime in 1948. I believe probably in November it'll wrap up, with some unrealistically long monologues that I have since turned into a part 2 that's a flashback to June 1944 to June 1945, and this is based on the flashback chapters and parts of Leon Uris's Exodus, where they're not just like flashbacks, they're elevated into more than that. They're integral parts of the narrative, because when there's like so many chapters in a row about like what these characters pass, it's like more like a non-linear format than an actual flashback, because like without those like parts talking about like who the characters are and like their stories and stuff, like it really wouldn't be the same story at all. I do highly recommend Exodus by Leon Uris. I am so overdue to reread it. It's just like one of the most like powerful books I've ever read. When I last read it when I was 24 years old, there were so many times I was like moved to tears. But I obviously won't give anything away. And as I believe I've mentioned in several previous videos, I really hated that, I think 1960, 61 film version of it. It just like totally made a wreck of it. It like changed so many things and left things out. And the fact that they like transformed like, you know, brunette Karen into some like vapid platinum blonde bimbo, and like weakling blonde Dove into some like tall, strong, like dark-haired, dark-eyed stud. Like seriously, I hate when Hollywood like F's up classic novels. Number 9. Oh, I'm sorry, I already did number 9. I'm getting back to this point. So my work in progress, The Strongest Branches of Uprooted Trees, it focuses on 9 teens and 2 20-somethings, but since has been expanded to more of the teens in different groups. I just felt like I was way too cruel originally, and like killed way too many of them off, just to show like how war really is, kind of like a counterpoint to other things. And so basically it will like it does focus on some of the other groups who like, you know, were separated at some point during the war, and they just like survived like separately, and then they eventually all meet up in France after the war, and they, you know, go different places. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm really looking forward to finally getting back to writing that. And so anyway, these characters are like navigating this strange new world and relearning how to be part of humanity and trying to feel normal again. I've also got several other books, several is probably an understatement, planned to cover the early post-liberation years, as well as like many years after the Shoah. And, you know, it really doesn't end, or didn't end for them, like after they, you know, readjusted to normal society, because like it kind of just does something to your mind. And even if you do like seem fairly normal, and you've like learned to pass and like get over stuff, and you're not really like locked in grief and stuff, sometimes even little things can trigger you decades later, because that really never leaves your mind. And that's just the same thing is true for pretty much any traumatic experience. Number 10. The story still didn't end after the survivors immigrated to Israel, America, Canada, Australia, England, and elsewhere. That's also an entire story in itself, learning how to adjust to a new country and live among people whose worst wartime experiences were rationing and worrying over loved ones in the service. Number 11. An interesting angle would be to write about people who came home to stay after the war, instead of going to an interim country and waiting to immigrate. There actually were some survivors who resumed their lives in places like Germany, Poland, France, Hungary, and Austria. And if you go to the USC Shoah Foundation Visual History Archive, I believe I got its name right, you'll see all these interviews. I have a separate blog post, so I do hope to turn into a video in future about how to do like, you know, research if this is something you're writing about, or even if you're just watching it because like, you know, family history or genealogy or whatever, doing a research paper, something like that. And they have, English is not the only language, and not Hebrew either. It's like all sorts of languages you can find. And obviously like someone who is doing the interview in like, let's say like Hungarian or German or Polish or whatever, they obviously like went home to stay after the war, so they weren't like immigrating anywhere. And that's like a really compelling, interesting story. Just a lot of people don't really cover a lot, or at least maybe it's covered obviously more in like those respective languages, not so much in English language literature. Number 12. I can't seem to think of any books about Americans who were anti-war. Though they were a small minority, there were people who opposed our involvement in the war, and even went to prison rather than be drafted. Number 13. My planned book, Righteously Unorthodox, or Unorthodox Righteousness, that also might be a possible title, which already has some scenes written as part of my series I'm now called the Saga of the Sewers. It's the Saga of the Sewards, I'm sorry, originally called Maxwell House and then changed to Max's House. Obviously, that's a topic for another thing. It starts in Poland, but quickly moves to Denmark and then Sweden. It focuses on the consequences of young teen Elżbieta's unorthodox but 100% consensual relationship with an older Nazi in his 20s. I might change his age around a little bit, and obviously I'm going to be aging her up a little bit as well, so the age difference isn't, quite so huge as it used to be. And obviously I'm also have since chosen to age up the same characters in Atlantic City who are Elżbieta's age, so it obviously would work out if I make her about 2 years older. And so anyway, that's about their relationship and how she turns the consequences around into a beautiful blessing she has to keep secret from her siblings, who have also come to Sweden with her. She comes to Sweden a bit after her younger siblings, her three older siblings, Samuel, Joseph, and Jadwiga, are still in Europe in various concentration camps, and they eventually all survive and come to Sweden by the end of the war after they're liberated. And so you can just write a regular storyline about characters who escape to a safe country. Number 14. Instead of writing about an American, Canadian, or British soldier, you could try writing about a Japanese or German soldier. Number 15. You can write about foreign nationals who were visiting or studying abroad when war broke out and were unable to come home. And that's a story many people aren't aware of. And one of my works cited in my bibliography for my book, Journey Through a Dark Forest, I don't know the title off of the top of my head, but I did cite it. It's about Americans who ended up in concentration camps. Obviously, this wasn't thousands upon thousands of them there, but I know there were at least 100, maybe several hundred of them for various reasons, like maybe doing missionary work, or they were studying abroad, or they were visiting people, or they were just going through back on the way home when the war broke out. I know this can seem kind of like a cliche, particularly when it's oh, a character just conveniently happens to go to Poland in late August or the summer of 1939, and oh, guess what? War comes on September 1st, and they're just stuck in Poland, or it's really difficult to come home. That's such a cliche and trope, and I even did that in my own book, and Movements in the Symphony of 1939. I since have changed it because there was a compelling reason for that storyline for the von Hindenburgs to be incommunicado for so very long with their friends, the Bronx, that Nate renamed the Smalls in America. So I just changed it to them, well, obviously I'm not going to give away the spoiler of where they really were when the book, hasn't come out yet. But I did change it to something that made sense for them to not be receiving letters and still in a, a dangerous situation before they, find a way to escape. But anyway, you don't need to make it a cliche if you do that. Just make it natural. So for example, if it is important part of the storyline, and if you really wanted to happen or whatever, you feel it's an important story to tell, because many people just don't know about this, have them already there. This could be for any historical as well, oh, you want someone to experience the summer of love in San Francisco, but don't conveniently have them just going there, oh, conveniently in the summer of 1967, maybe they're already going to school there, or they had a job offer, they're very young, or whatever, they're visiting friends, and gradually over time it happens when they're already there, swinging London in the 60s, just things like that. You don't want it to make it so cliche and convenient to, oh, they just happen to go there right on the eve of something big happening. Just make it a little bit more subtle and not feel oh, you're just forcing it in for the sake of telling a good yarn. So number 16, the final point. Not everyone who managed to escape before the Nazis devoured them went to England or North America. Many people went to South America, Shanghai, Curacao, Switzerland, Turkey, etc. And please let me know in the comments if you can, I'm sorry about the noise in the background, if you can think of any other original angles or settings for a World War II or Holocaust book or TV show or movie to basically just, set it apart from all the others, because I really don't like hearing people saying, oh, it's all the same, or it's too depressing. Then you just, haven't looked hard enough, or you just don't know what to look for. You're just not familiar with the subgenre in general. And so please, if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. And again, I really, really do appreciate seeing comments, and like the video, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when I upload next. And see you guys again very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.